Before reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, which is of our means of conquest, we first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayana, unto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and Srila Vyasadeva, the author. By regular attendance and classes on the Bhagavad, by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed, practically nil. And thus, loving service unto the glorious Lord, who is praised with transcendental hymns, becomes established in an irrevocable fact. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 3, the pastimes of the Lord out of Vrindavan. Text number 14. Please repeat. Kriyan Bhuvo Yam Shapitaro Baro Kriyan Bhuvo Yam Shapitaro Baro
Kriyan Bhuvo Yam Shapitaro Baro
Yadrona Bhishma Bhima Mulai Yadrona Bhishma Bhima Mulai Astada Sakshahiniko Mad Hamshe Ashtata Saksha Hiniko Madamshe
Ashadashakshauniko Manamshaye
Ashte Balam Dhruvisaham Yadunam Aste Balam Dhruvisaham Yadunam Kriyan Buboyam Shapitaro Baro Yadrona Bhishma Juna Bhimamulai Astada Saksha Hiniko Maramshe Aste Balam Druvishaham Yadunam Kriyan Buboyam Shapitaro Baro Yadrona Bhishma Juna Bhimamulai Astada Saksha Hiniko Maramshe Aste Balam Druvisham Yadunam Kriyan Buboyam Shapitaro Baro Yadrona Bhishma Juna Bhimamulai Ashta Saksha Hiniko Maramshe Aste Balam Dhruvisaham Yadunam
Kiyan Buvoyam Shupitaro Baro
Kiyan Buvoyam Shapitaro Baro
Yadrona Bhishma Juna Bhimamulai Ashtadashakshauniko Madamshair Aste Balam Durvishaham Yadunam
Kiyan Baboyam Sapatoro Baro
Kriyan Buvoyam Shapitaro Baro
Yadruna Pradojana Bhimamule
Yadrona Bhishma Juna Bhimamulai
Astadas Adahina Komal Aste Balam Durvaham Yadavinoham
Aste Balam Druvisham Yadunam
Kiyan Buvoyam Sapitaro Baro
Kriyan Buvoyam Shapitaro Baro
Yadrona Bhishma Juna Bhimamulai
Yadrona Bhishma Juna Bhimamulai
Astada Saksha Hiniko Maramshe
Astada Saksha Hiniko Maramshe
Aste Balam Dhuvishaham Yadunam
Aste Balam Druvisham Yadunam Kriyan Buvoyam Shapitaro Baro Yadrona Bhishma Juna Bhimamulai Astada Saksha Hiniko Maramshe Aste Balam Druvisham Yadunam Anyone else?
Kiyan Buvoyam Shapitoro Baro
Kiyan Buvoyam Sapitaro
Vitaro Bharo.
Yadrona Bhishmarjuna Bhimamule.
Yatrona Bhismarjuna Bhimamulai.
Ashtadasaksha Hiniko Madamshar.
Astadasakshaiko Maramshe.
Aste Balam Durvishaham Yadunam.
Aste balam duvishaham yadunam.
Okay, Kiyan.
Kiyan.
What is this? What is this?
What is this?
Bhuvaha
Bhuvaha
of the earth.
of the earth.
Ayam.
Ayam.
This. Shapita.
Shapita.
Abated.
Abate.
Uru.
Oru.
Very great.
Very great.
Baraha.
Bara.
Burden.
Burden.
Yat.
Yat.
Rich.
Rich.
Drona.
Drona.
Bhishma.
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 Arjuna.
Arjuna. Arjuna.
Bhima.
Bhima.
Mulan.
Mulan.
With the help.
With the help.
Astadasa.
Astadasa.
18.
18.
Akshahinika.
Akshahinika.
Phalanxes of military strength.
This is the military strength.
In parentheses it says, Veda Bhagavatam 1:16-34. Next word is Mat Amshan.
Madaksham.
With my descendants.
With my descendants.
Aste.
Aste.
Are still there.
Still there.
Balam.
Balam.
Great strength.
Great strength.
Druvishaham.
Visham.
Unbearable.
Unbearable.
Yadunam.
Yaduna.
Of the Yadu dynasty.
Of the Yadu dynasty.
Translation, please repeat. After the end of the battle of Kurukshetra,
After the end of the battle of Kurukshetra,
the Lord said, the abatement of the earth's great burden, 18 oxohenes,
18 oxohenes,
has now been effected with the help of Drona,
with the help of Drona,
Bhishma, Arjuna,
Marjuna,
and Bhima.
and Bhima.
But what is this?
But what is this?
There is still the great strength of the Yadu dynasty,
There's still the great strength of the Yadu dynasty,
born of myself,
born in myself,
which may be a more unbearable burden.
which may be a more unbearable burden.
Okay, after the end of the battle of Kurukshetra, the Lord said, the abatement of the earth's great burden, 18 oxoheni, has now been effected with the help of Drona, Bhishma, Arjuna, and Bhima. But what is this? There is still the great strength of the Yadu dynasty, born of myself, which may be a more unbearable burden. Srila Prabhupada's divine purport. It is a wrong theory that due to an increase in population, the world becomes overburdened, and therefore there are wars and other annihilating processes. The earth is never overburdened. The heaviest mountains and oceans on the face of the earth hold more living entities than there are human beings, and they are not overburdened. If a census were taken of all the living beings on the surface of the earth, certainly it would be found that the number of humans is not even 5% of the total number of living beings. If the birth rate of human beings is increasing, then the birth rate of other living beings is increasing proportionately. The birth rate of lower animals, beasts, aquatics, birds, etc., is far greater than that of human beings. there is an adequate arrangement for food for all the living beings all over the earth by the order of the Supreme Lord. And he can arrange more and more if there's actually a disproportionate increase of living beings. Therefore, there is no question of an increase in population causing a burden. The earth became overburdened due to dharma glani, or irregular discharge of the Lord's desire. The Lord appeared on the earth to curb the increase in miscreants and not the increase in population. This is wrongly put forward by the mundane economics. When Lord Krishna appeared, there had been a sufficient increase in miscreants who had violated the desire of the Lord. The material creation is meant for fulfilling the desire of the Lord. And his desire is that the conditioned souls who are unfit to enter into the kingdom of God have a chance to improve their conditions for entering. The entire process of cosmic arrangement is intended just to give a chance to the conditioned souls to enter the kingdom of God. And there is an adequate arrangement for their maintenance by the nature of the Lord. Therefore, there may be a great increase in population on the surface of the earth if the people are exactly in line with God consciousness and are not miscreants. Such a burden on the earth is a source of pleasure for her. There are two kinds of burdens. There is the burden of the beast and the burden of love. The burden of the beast is unbearable, but the burden of love is a source of pleasure. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti describes the burden of love very practically. He says that the burden of the husband on the young wife, the burden of the child on the lap of the mother, and the burden of wealth on the businessman, although actually burdens from the point of view of heaviness, are sources of pleasure. And in the absence of such burdensome objects, one may feel the burden of separation, which is heavier to bear than the actual burden of love. When Lord Krishna referred to the burden of the Yadu dynasty on the earth, he referred to something different than the burden of the beast. The large numbers of family members born of Lord Krishna counted to some millions and was certainly a great increase in the population on the earth. But because all of them were expansions of the Lord himself by his transcendental plenary expansions, they were a source of great pleasure for the earth. When the Lord referred to them in connection with the burden on the earth, he had in mind their imminent disappearance from the earth. All the members of the family of Lord Krishna were incarnations of different demigods, and they were to disappear from the surface of the earth along with the Lord. When he referred to the unbearable heaviness on the earth in connection with the Yadu dynasty, he was referring to the burden of their disappearance, or the burden of their separation. Srila Jiva Goswami confirms this inference. That means, although it wasn't stated directly, you could infer that, as Prabhupada explained, that he was referring to the separation. Prabhupada himself did not make the inference, but it was done by Srila Jiva Goswami. So therefore Srila Prabhupada is quoting Srila Jiva Goswami in this regard. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I offer my obeisances to His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who has so kindly appeared on the surface of this earth and is opening our eyes with the torch of knowledge. When will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who has established on the surface of the earth the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, give me shelter on his lotus feet? So, 3 or 4 points, main points Prabhupada makes here. Of course, number 1 was about the burden of the population on the earth being too much, and therefore there's some sort of wars or pandemics or something to decrease it. The Prabhupada makes the point, as he has in other places. In other places he has said it is simply due to a mismanagement and a lack of God consciousness or Krishna consciousness. Here he says the same thing in a sort of different way. He makes the point that actually the earth is very pleased and can very easily take care of more people, just like she takes care of so many other creatures. And Prabhupada gives reference that actually human beings are only at most 5% amongst all the different species, if they're that much. When you start to include microscopic life, it's probably a lot less even, maybe just 1%. Human population is only like 12 billion people. But, there's probably 12 billion of just one species. Certain species probably has at least 12 billion. But to speak of bacteria, sometimes there's millions, could be billions, just on the size of a very small period. Or it may not be as small as easily as small as the tip of a pin. Srila Prabhupada states that the tip of a pen reduced 10,000 times is the size of the soul inside the body. So, but so many bacteria can fit in such a little place. So bacteria, gee whiz, far beyond 12 billion. There must be trillions and killions of the population of bacteria on the earth.
There's so many bacteria within the human body.
Yeah, just within one body. So the earth is providing for all of them. She very easily provide for the human beings. The problem is that human beings, as Prabhupada has stated here, Dharma Glenair, if they have deviated from the Lord's desire for the creation, the Lord has set up a very simple plan. Basically, our sociology is called monashram, and that plan divides the human population into 4 classes, and of course there are hundreds and thousands and more subclasses all within that of different types of human beings performing different types of occupations. And it's always like that in human society. But when human society deviates from executing these duties according to the Lord's desire, then there can be problems. So the government and the Vaishyas, they have all deviated, and consequently the Sudras have deviated, and the Brahmanas have deviated because they just become instruments for the government and the businessmen. They're just, whoever pays them the most, they do it. So the Brahmins have deviated a long time ago, at the beginning of Kali Yuga, practically speaking, and just serving the whims of the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, and they've created this whole system of capitalism based on greed. And they're simply, on the other side, to counteract it, they take this whole system of atheistic communism. Prabhupada said we're spiritual communists, everything belongs to God. But there is no God. And the Communist Manifesto of Karl Marx and his friend, there is no God. That's seen to be the opiate of the people, something to give them to dream about, and therefore remain an instrument of capitalists. Oh, we're going to heaven, therefore, we serve we love God and country, God and nation, and therefore they have created this nationalism, So anyway, they've created these systems, instead of the leaders pointing the way, they've created this democracy, which Prabhupada calls sometimes demonocracy, whereby the masses of people, as long as they're old enough to vote, at first it was just the white people who owned enough property, they could vote. In other words, you had to have property and you had to be a white male, and then you could vote. That was at the founding of the country, which was the first democratic country, outside of Greece, had some sort of form of democracy. That's where they sort of learned it from. Rereading different Greek philosophers, different other philosophers in the 16 and 1700s, they began to speak about these things, and the founding fathers of this country, they were reading all these things too, and so they tried to actually create one of those after getting free from the British Raj. So, but they didn't let anybody vote. They wasn't going to let anybody vote. It was just going to be the white males who had enough money, enough property. And we know that through the course of time, other people have been allowed to vote. But, it can be the guy just hanging around the pub, and the thing is, then it becomes the person who can most trick the people into voting for them. It doesn't mean that they all have a lack of integrity. Maybe somebody bases their whole campaign on integrity, and then they actually try to meet that integrity. Sometimes you run into politicians like that, and other times you run into just the opposite, that they say what they need to say, and they do what they need to do, and and they take bribes, and they do so many things, in order to increase their own wealth and to increase the wealth of their constituents, more so than others. And so all this has went on. And, this is how the world is running. And they come up with all these ideas, such as, the idea of evolution and survival of the fittest. If you're not fit, you're not going to survive. And they've put aside the Shastra. And then they've, in the Western world, we've based it, just on our readings of the Hebrew books of knowledge. And the New Testament is written down by various Christian theologians, as well as what was decided at the Council of Nicaea, which was headed by King Constantine of the Roman Empire, decided which books would go into the Bible and exactly how they were to be interpreted. And there was actually a big debate over whether reincarnation should be there, because many of the early fathers of the Christian church supported that doctrine. But they kicked it out in order to make some harmony amongst themselves. And the Bible became the Bible basically that was put forward by bishops with the support of King Constantine. And if you went against that, you were a heretic. So all those who supported the doctrine of reincarnation previously, they became heretics, and they would just kill them. So much, removing ourselves from the way the Lord wants the world to run in human society. And we've created this society whereby we're killing so many species. We're ruining the earth. You know, there's so many human beings trying to say, no, it shouldn't be done like this, but still, you know, they haven't been able to bring it back to normal. The same with the air, the same with the water. Yes,
Are
Prabhu?
there still some groups which believe in reincarnation?
Huh?
Are there still some groups? Which do-
Some.
In
Not
the
as
Bible,
many.
in the Bible, I have a couple Christian friends. I think even in the Bible now, you wouldn't really call it reincarnation, but in the current Bible, I think King James Version, it still says that basically that God would basically give some people second chances in another, one more life, essentially. Like for those who he deems deserving another chance, he even gives them another life to try again. So at the very least, it says that they do at least one more life for certain people.
But in the Bible, definitely the prophets reincarnate.
Yeah.
Satyaraj wrote a little book on it. It's called Reincarnation Controversy. And it discusses reincarnation from the other scriptures of the world. And so you can look through that and get some reference to reincarnation in the Bible. But again, they left out so
No,
much.
there is Seventh-day
doctrine.
Adventists. They believe in reincarnation. Seventh-day Adventists.
Well, they believe in vegetarianism. I'm not sure of reincarnation. There's more Christian vegetarians than who maybe accept the doctrine of reincarnation. They are changing. Many individuals do, but the mainstream churches, their doctrine is heaven or hell. And there's many who are protesting against God sending people to hell forever. There's a lot of that going on also. That, you know, how is it God can send people to hell forever? So they're protesting against that also, which is questionable, because you don't find it so much in the Old Testament. And, you know, where they, it's not even so much spoken by Jesus, who spoke very closely to the laws of the Hebrew world at that time, who was himself, you know, a Jewish person. So I believe in books like the Book of Revelation, which was written 100 years after Jesus' birth, is where, you know, some of these things come from concerning Satan and the devil and hell, which is certainly there, but it's not that any soul is condemned forever. God's arrangement isn't like that. Anyway, that's one big discussion that Prabhupada makes, that it's all due to gloma, dharma, glania, or not following the order of God, is why the earth is not taking care of everyone, why human beings seem to have a hard time, and there's no escaping our problems unless we can get back to pure Krishna consciousness or pure God consciousness. You know, when they'll do that remains to be seen, but you know, when there are more and more Krishna conscious leaders, then it will come to be. But there has to be Krishna conscious leaders all over the world. Another important, or another point that he makes, is that how Krishna disseminated the Aksahini divisions on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He says with the help of Drona, Bhishma, Arjuna, and Bhima. So Drona and Bhishma, they were responsible for killing most of the Pandavas' forces. I mean, they would just mow them down. You know, after Bhishma had left, that's when all the rules that were agreed upon became broken. With the powerful Bhishma there, everyone was afraid to break the rules, were laid down at the beginning of the war. But Bhishma would very easily mow down the Pandava forces, and Krishna was constantly having to urge Arjuna to meet him in battle, because only Arjuna could stand before him, practically speaking. But Arjuna was a little too soft-hearted, because that was his grandfather, and so he wouldn't try his his hardest to actually slay him. So anyway, when Bhishma was finally killed by the trickery of the Lord and the arrangement of providence, Drona stepped in, and Drona started doing things that was not exactly agreed upon. He would use celestial astras against ordinary troops, which was not something agreed upon. And he also took part in the murder of Abhimanyu, which was against the rules of the war. In the rules of the war, only one Kshatriya could face another Kshatriya. Or, of course, very, very powerful Kshatriyas could be attacked by many, many, many ordinary troops, cavalry and like that, because they could dispense them, by their different astras. But otherwise, when people of equal merit met, then nobody else would come between them. They would simply fight between themselves. So when Abhimanyu ended up in the midst of the Kaurava army fighting them, he was victorious. And when everyone came to combat him, to get rid of him and stop him from mowing down the Kaurava forces, then he would defeat his opponent. So the only way they could get rid of him was to cheat, so to speak. So they all attacked him together from behind and in the front, and they got rid of his weapons, and then they arranged for his loss to the son of Duryodhana, who also cheated because he killed Abhimanyu while Abhimanyu was still coming to his feet. So consequently, Krishna arranged for all these warriors to be killed in a sort of duplicitous way, such as Karna. He didn't have his weapons in his hand. He was trying to remove his chariot out of a mud hole, and Krishna told Arjuna to slay him, just as he allowed Abhimanyu to be slain. He said that will be the judgment, that you will be slain just like you have allowed Abhimanyu to be slain. And so therefore Karna was slain without his weapons in his hand. And Drona was similarly slain by a falsehood being told that made him momentarily put aside his weapons and take his mind off the battle and enter into meditation, to the extent that he actually left the world before Drishtadyumna had cut off his head. But Drishtadyumna took the opportunity to then approach the chariot of Drona, which he had not been able to do before, because Drona could always turn him back. But now Drona was sitting in meditation, so he killed him in meditation. So all these great warriors were dispatched one way or another by Krishna using his Yogamaya potency or his mysticism to defeat them. Still, the point is that Drona and Bhishma took away the lives of so many, and Krishna wasn't fighting, so who took away all the lives of the Kauravas? Most of it was done by Bhima and Arjuna. I mean, sometimes they would kill one whole Akshini division in one day. They had 18 Akshini divisions on the field, and the battle lasted 18 days. So just in averages, 18 were killed in a day. But some days, not that many. On one day in particular, the day that Arjuna had killed Jayadratha, and the battle continued into the night. The rule was they wouldn't fight at night. But that night they fought because Drona wouldn't stop fighting after Krishna had arranged for the killing of Arjuna's foe. Then he retaliated by continuing the fight. So the fight lasted all night long, and on that particular day, just so many warriors, Oxahini divisions were eliminated. And Bhima was something like, even worse than the fictional character, the Hulk. Bhima could just enter into a mass of elephant forces where these great warriors would ride on elephants, and he would just slam his club into the forehead of an elephant and kill it, or he'd just hit it into the side and just destroy all of its ribs and everything about it. The warriors would go flying everywhere in the field of battle. He was just wielding that club like tornadoes. He was just eliminating so many warriors. I mean, his fighting was just ruthless. No one could stand before him, practically speaking. So that was another point. Then, of course, the beautiful point that Prabhupada brought out, that how the Yadu dynasty, which people, when just hearing the verse, you would think, oh, they were even a greater burden because they were a huge military force. But no, they were not an ordinary military force, and they were not certainly an exploitive military force. There are so many exploitive military forces, so many military dictatorships that exploit. You could say even in a democratic country like the United States, how the military exploits. They get so many dollars, they have so many bases all over the world. So many times people complain about these bases. On these bases, they're not subject to the laws of foreign countries, and so many times soldiers commit crimes and they can't be prosecuted in that country, and they just send them home. They do things like that. Sometimes if it becomes a big public disaster, public relations disaster, they court-martial them and give them some jail time and stuff like that. There's just so many ways the military exploits the U.S. tax dollars. Military takes so much that the people in America have a less potent medical system than people in so many other countries, especially developed countries, have a much better medical system for the masses of their citizens. But America, they don't have the money to do that, and the bureaucracy is arranged in such a way that there's a constant fight between insurance companies and hospitals and government money, instead of having the money just to put in to making sure that every citizen can receive medical care. They can't, because the military has soaked it up. Because the military, is providing for them whatever oil they need and whatever else they need. They can just arrange through all sorts of unscrupulous ways that they can arrange, like they made it look like not Osama bin Laden, but that other guy in Iraq made it look like he had weapons of mass destruction. There were no weapons of mass destruction. So what was the reason? What was the reason for them going there and taking control for, some time and becoming the chief purchaser of all their oil? So all these things go on, but the Yadu forces were not like that type of military force. The earth actually loved them. They were all incarnations of Krishna or devotees of Krishna. And with the burden that was being talked about was the burden of separation. The earth would feel a great burden to have them leave. Just like when there's anyone very, very, very dear to us and they suddenly leave the world, we feel a great burden of separation. So the earth felt a great burden of separation when the Yadu dynasty left. We have to remember that the leader of the Yadu dynasty was Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram themselves. So when Lord Krishna and Balaram were leaving, the rest of the Yadu was arranged for the rest of the Yadu dynasty to leave. So the earth, was crying, practically speaking, and then knowing that the next age would come, Kali, where she would be constantly abused and, and consequently, withhold from the human society because of their abuses. And it's not like the snakes are abusing or, the leopards are abusing. Who's abusing? It's the human beings who are abusing. It's Kali Yuga means that they abuse. It's the abusive age. So, this, it all begins with the influence of this age of darkness. People just become too greedy, too lusty, too angry, everything, they take on all the demoniac qualities, and they attempt to enjoy life as demons on the earth, practically speaking. And, of course, that is not very pleasing to the earth. It only goes on so long before the ages change, but from our human calculation, it's beyond our imagination, practically. We can say, oh, it's only 436,000 years, but we have a hard time just living for 100 years. That seems long. So how many 100 years are in 400,000 years? There's so many generations that go by and go by. So it seems so long to those of us who are so used to just having short lives. But it's just a small amount of time in the eternal calendar. Okay, so time to stop. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.